Hi, this is John Schlitt, and you're listening to People Just Like Me talk faith and life with Joe Taylor on Faith's Edge.
You can stand firm-footed, rooted, and just know that you are enough for what God has called you to do.
Thank you, John, for the introduction. If you haven't heard John Schlitt's The Greater Cause, then you haven't heard John Schlitt at his rockin' best. Thank you so much, John, for being a friend to the show, and I certainly appreciate talking to you soon. This is the 117th episode of On Faith's Edge. My name is Joe Taylor, recovering atheist and your servant in Jesus Christ. This is your place to hear conversations about God and living a life of faith in Jesus Christ. This episode's guest, Anita Faye, burst onto the national scene in 2007 with the release of her critically acclaimed project, Are You Willing?, which earned her a Gospel Album of the Year nomination from the International Independent Music Awards. In our conversation today, Anita shares how growing up in a diverse culture shaped the eclectic nature of her music, how having her faith challenged brought her closer to God, and how her newest project, Kingdom Journey, carries a deeply personal message that God is always faithful, even through our most difficult seasons. Anita has a profound wisdom and joy that only comes from a life of trials and victories, led and molded by God. Why do you call yourself a late bloomer?
I look at just different areas of my life of where I'm at now versus where I envision myself being. You know, so many times we're guilty. I certainly have been guilty of putting milestones out, mentally, and I want to do this by this age, and I want to have this, and I want to have accomplished certain things. And, sometimes you hit those targets, sometimes you don't. But the sweetness of different victories that I've achieved is they've come at later stages, and I've learned to reconcile that and be okay with it. And I think it's also a testament to the fact that it's just never too late. And so we should all just continue to remember even what the scriptures tell us, that he who has begun a good work in us will perform it. And sometimes that may not be as quickly as you might think it should be, but it will still happen.
And some of us reach a point where we think, is this ever going to happen? So did you have that throughout your early life and throughout your early career, and where you just wanted to say, you know what, I'm done. I'm just going to go do what everybody else does?
More times than I can probably count, if I'm being honest. Absolutely. And those are the moments that you just have to have a real harsh conversation sometimes with yourself. And more importantly, I think just to be still. We don't value quiet enough. We're sort of a hyped up, over stimulated society where there's everything under the sun that vies for our attention and our focus. And sometimes we just need to shut everything out and just be still and be completely quiet, and even get to a point of being in solitude in order to hear. And I think when we allow ourselves to get there, which is a vulnerable place to be, that's when those reassurances will come. That's when I believe, in your prayer life, that God will minister to you and assure you that the best is truly yet to come, and that there's a path for you, and it may be different. You may have detours along the way, but certainly it doesn't mean that it's too late or that it's over.
Did you reach a point in your journey where you realized, man, I kind of found my groove here. I think I'm on the right path?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I'm having that moment now in these last few years, I should say, where it does definitely feel like things are starting to connect, and I'm aligning myself with the right people, because that's such a big part of it too, right? I think sometimes things are hindered because we're not where we should be in terms of the network we have or the support system that we have around us. And sometimes we have to get to a place of identifying the things that are holding us back. Sometimes it's us. And in many cases, it's the surroundings, the environment, the people that we're aligned with that perhaps we shouldn't be. Some of the things that we have to do is take a step back and say, okay, that may have served me for a different point in time and a different purpose in my life, but if it doesn't serve us anymore, to move forward, we have to really stop and evaluate that.
What kind of things were holding you back, do you think?
A big part of it was my mentality, my mindset, me creating self-sabotage, me being less than confident in what God equipped me to do, who He's called me to be, really understanding what it means to walk in your truth and the authority that comes with that. And so really getting to a point of self-love. It almost sounds like a cliche, but it's a process, and it's a long journey to get to that place where you can say, you know what, I'm okay. It doesn't take anything from anyone else. It just means you can stand firm-footed, rooted, and just know that you are enough for what God has called you to do. Because sometimes we think we have to have every layer of accomplishment and credentials and, things that you can sort of brag about, like your brag sheet or your resume that is the length of a scroll, right? It doesn't require all of that. And sometimes we lose confidence because we feel like, oh, well, this person did this, and, look at all of these accomplishments, and I'm not where I should be. And our measuring stick is so wrong because we get stuck in this rut and we compare ourselves against other people, and that's never been the litmus test. Your call, our call, each of us individually is for a unique purpose. And so our measuring stick should never be what someone else has done. Draw from them, certainly learn from them, be inspired by them, but just recognize that your journey is unique, and you're going to walk your path according to whatever milestone and whatever calling, the things that are for you to do and for you to accomplish. They're still going to be sitting out there. They beckon to us, right? They call us. And sometimes we get overwhelmed, or we get dismayed. We think things aren't happening. We put things on the back burner and we return to them later, but they're still there calling us, patiently waiting for us to come home to roost. If it's not too late for you to, get the snow and salt out and come to your senses and get back to your true purpose and destiny.
When we feel like we're losing our path, or we're not quite sure where to go or what to do, and we start comparing ourselves to the accomplishment of others and where we think we should be, that's a dangerous path. And I've always felt you go as far as God shows you to go, and when you get there, He'll show you more.
Yes, exactly. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Well said. Very well stated.
Anita, you've certainly been on a journey, haven't you?
Indeed, I have.
You see what I did there?
Yes, I love it. I love the tie-in. I felt it coming.
Let's talk about Kingdom Journey, Anita.
Let's.
Wow, what a great project. There seems to be a theme throughout this album, and it's kind of what we just talked about. Life's not always easy, but God is certainly in control.
Indeed, yeah, and you're right. That is the theme, which is that we're all, walking out our truth. We're all walking in this journey that we're called to take, and life is filled with exploration, but it's certainly also filled with highs and lows and setbacks and heartbreaks, and all of it is meant to usher us to the ultimate place of awakening, I like to think, and coming to the full knowledge of understanding more who God is and who He wants to be in our lives. And so for me, Kingdom Journey really is sort of this, okay, you've had different experiences and you've questioned your faith and you've, sort of struggled with different things, but ultimately you wake up to this sort of sense and knowing that God is faithful, and really embracing that. And it's okay. I think so many times, especially, I dare say, in Christendom and even in Christian gospel music, we love the feel-good story. Everyone wants to feel good, and we should. We're not called to live in misery. I don't believe that for one second. But at the same time, it's okay to acknowledge and not sugarcoat the fact that life is real, and real things happen to all people, including those who, are called to this faith. We should acknowledge that, and, even Ecclesiastes admonishes us that we weep with those who weep, and we rejoice with those who rejoice. And there are moments where you go through a weeping season, and it's okay for us to relate to one another in those times and say, yeah, It's okay, let it out. But know that in the end, your steps are ordered and you will get past this. So I think thematically, the material in the project certainly speaks to all of that, the highs and the lows.
I just had Cole C. Mullen on the show, and she talks about a point in her life that she calls her night season. And,
yes.
And she makes very clear that God is there if you look for him. You may not always see him and you may not always feel him, but he is there. We are all certainly on a journey, and God will be there for us, but you just have to make sure you stay there with him.
I think it's so important to acknowledge that, and that's the power of these conversations, right? Is to encourage one another and to uplift each other and say, we know what it's like to be in that dark place. And while it doesn't feel good, it is a metamorphosis, right? I think of the butterfly who has to start from that larvae state and go into the cocoon. And it's one of the Earth's major mysteries of how this being, that this thing that starts crawling in its formative years, goes inside the cocoon and liquefies, but then somehow emerges into this beautiful creature, the butterfly. And it's dark in there, and it's uncomfortable, and you're changing. And everything that you knew before, the form that you were, the world around you was very different. It was solid and it was sure. And then you're going through this change on the inside, right, which is this very dark place. But when you come forth, you will come forth as pure gold after you've been tried in the fire. And so I think we shouldn't be faint in heart when we do come into those situations. It's easier to say than to do, especially when you're in the middle of it. But again, trust me, as someone who's been through some things and can testify that it does get better, it's a process. It is a process, and you'll get past it. You'll get over it. God will bring you through it. You just have to trust him. You just have to trust him. And I guess this is a bit of a plug, but that leads me to one of the songs on the project that my husband wrote, so I'm really bragging on him more than anything else, a song called Untraceable, which is actually a tribute to his grandmother, who was a very strong woman in her faith, a praying woman who taught her children and grandchildren that even if you can't trace him, you have to trust him. Trust him when you can't trace him, when you don't see him moving, when you don't understand him, when all hell breaks loose, when you have more questions than answers. Trust him, even when you cannot trace him. That's what that dark place is for. Very
profound. Smart guy, your husband, huh?
Yeah.
Your music, Anita, and it's evident on Kingdom Journey, has a wide range of styles: reggae, jazz, gospel, even hip hop is in there. Can you just please pick a style, Anita?
I wish I could.
It's a gift. It really is a gift. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I am that person too. Everything about me is a little bit eclectic. I'm a little this, I'm a little that. It reminds me of Donnie and Marie, who say I'm a little bit country and I'm a little bit rock and roll. It's one of those things where, fortunately for me, I was exposed to a lot of the arts growing up. And so I had the opportunity to just hear and listen to different genres. And Ella Fitzgerald, I think, is hands down my all-time favorite jazz female vocalist ever. And so I fell in love with her music, and I started my musical journey both singing as well as playing instruments. My first instrument was the violin. I was horrible at it. So I quickly, after a year, said, okay, maybe I'll switch to something that is more suitable. I played clarinet for a number of years, all the while still, singing in church and in choirs in the community and in school, and just had the opportunity to really learn so much about this musical landscape that's out there. And it comes from just being both appreciative of the various forms, as well as just feeling like when I am inspired, I draw from whatever I think the song needs, right? It's a vehicle of sorts to carry that message out in a unique way. And so the project really is a testament to just that diversity of how my brain works, as well as, my eclectic taste in musical style.
So you mentioned Untraceable. I personally was particularly struck by Angels in Heaven.
I get chills even just thinking about it, and every time I hear the title, it just conjures up so many memories because we were here, of course, living in Las Vegas, and last year, as everyone knows, in October on the 1st, this crazy wild man decided, to open fire on all of those innocent people. It brought back memories for me and my husband because, believe it or not, coincidentally, we were both living in Boston at the time of the marathon bombing.
Oh, wow.
And had some friends that were impacted or whose family members were impacted. And I remember in the aftermath of all of that, when they did that massive manhunt, they closed the city down, basically, and they said no public transportation, no one is to be driving in the street, we don't want to see people out, we're going to go get this guy. And the only thing that you could do is literally watch it play out on TV. And so it was the most eerie feeling when you're looking at the footage and the aerial shots, and it's all quiet. It's like a ghost town. Plenty of people live in Boston, mind you, but that day you were not to be caught outside because they were on a mission. And I remember, talking to, at the time, former coworkers who had cousins, friends, siblings, that just one by one, knowing the number of people that were impacted, not just those who lost their lives, but those who were victimized by it. And the same thing here, I have coworkers that were down in the area at the concert who were able to escape, in some cases narrowly, and others who had friends who were either injured or unfortunately lost their lives. And so it just struck a chord with us. And so that song is really a tribute to the victims' families, as well as the survivors, to just never forget it. It's a song of comfort. We really hope and pray that it's also a song of healing, because it's a devastating act to happen, but it's certainly something that when you live through it and you're part of that unique group that no one ever wants to be part of, where you've been victimized by such a heinous act of violence, it just offers something for people to really minister to what they may be going through.
I think about these events, the Boston Marathon bombing, and I think about the Vegas shooting and some of the other events recently that have the shootings that have gone on, and it takes events like this to make us realize that we're all one, man. Yeah. Despite the differences, despite everything else, we're all one. We're in this together. Let's set all that other junk aside and just realize that in Jesus Christ, we're all in this together.
Yeah, and sometimes when you're going through that, you don't feel that way, and so, I think that's another gesture that the song offers, is just to say, hey, you are being prayed for and considered during this incredible time that most people would never really be able to relate to, and someone is thinking of you as you think of your loved one. And you're right, in that way, it's definitely a song of hope, because as you know, lyrically, it also talks about how hate tried to have its way on that day, but we have to rise above that and understand that there is still love. There are people who love in this world, and that is the Great Commission, that we are to love one another. And so lest we get caught up into all of the sensationalism of the news stories that are running rampant in the media, and there are plenty, legitimately so, it doesn't overshadow the fact that love still abounds, and there are people in this world that love.
Perfectly said. We've talked about Untraceable. We've talked about Angels in Heaven. What is your favorite piece off this album?
Ooh, you're going to put me on the spot. It's so tough because they all become like your babies in a way, and you love them all. I would say if I had to pick one, it's probably Cast My Cares.
Cast My Cares.
Yes.
Anita, do you mind if we take a few minutes and listen to a little bit of Cast My Cares?
would love it.
But I do not know, I really don't know. If I can see past my tears, I guess I'll be still. I will let this wall break down inside my soul. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to cast my cares upon you. I'm going to kneel before your throne. I beg you to please forgive me if anything in me is wrong. I ask you to please lift this burden. Let this cup pass from me. But if not, teach me how to go through.
Anita, how did you come to believe in Jesus Christ?
I grew up in church at an early age, went to Sunday services, went to midweek Bible study, did the vacation Bible school, all of that. So I was exposed to the gospel through very strong parenting. My mother and my grandmother raised me. My father happens to be a preacher. He's in Tennessee. Interestingly enough, I was just with him at a convocation where he was speaking. But despite that, I had to come to the faith through my own terms. My mom was really dynamic, and she always said, look, I want you to understand what I believe, and I want you to have a foundation. But ultimately, it is up to you to choose what you believe and how you choose to interact with God and faith. She never was the type of disciplinarian who said, you know, you have to do this because I said so. We went to church because it was required of us. Don't get me wrong. As a child, you certainly need that discipline. But especially in our preteen and teenage years, she was really good about making it clear that she doesn't want us just to go through the motions, but we have to want a relationship with God for ourselves. And so that ignited in me this understanding and really sort of this quest of, okay, what do I believe? Not just because this is what's taught in the home or because this is what comes across the pulpit and this is what's expected of me to understand and believe, but I have to know Jesus for myself. And through various experiences in my life, I was able to really see the hand of God move in terms of just different opportunities that were presented to me, His favor. And so I came to my faith journey, honestly, at an early age. And yet it's because I was challenged to say, don't just take my word for it, but know Him for yourself. And sort of introspectively understood that I needed to read the scriptures and vet that against other types of secular reading that I was going to be exposed to, certainly in high school and in college. And I'm grateful for that. I really am truly grateful for that.
So you came to faith in childhood, but then you had a time where you had to choose your own faith. You had to say, yeah, I believe this stuff. God is real to me. This is where I'm planting my flag. I believe this stuff. I believe in God, and I believe that Jesus Christ is who He said He was. Did that come in like late teenage year or early adulthood?
It came probably late teenage and into my early 20s. And the reason I had to do, I would say, even more of my work, right, is because I think at even earlier ages these days, get exposed to so much different worldviews, different beliefs. I grew up in a cultural melting pot in Monterey, California, Central California, about an hour and a half south of San Francisco. Very sort of progressive community where it really was like the United Nations. My classmates were every hue of the rainbow, and people who look like me and a whole lot of people who did not, people from different cultures, people from other nationalities, certainly people from different faith traditions, and people who were either agnostic or atheist. And in conversations with people, what would come up, would be sort of these challenges. Well, why should you believe that? And it's just another book of mythology, and the Bible is just storytelling. And, I believe in this, and this is what we do in my home. And so it opens you to a different dynamic entirely, where you have to go, what? Now, okay, that was a good question, but what about this? And you start questioning a lot of things, which forces you to really go back and say, okay, I need to understand this for myself, and really know that I know that I know that I know that this is what I believe.
Oh, man, I know exactly what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. And it's tough, right? I mean, when you're a teenager, you don't always have the skills to navigate that. It's a very confusing time, which is why, a lot of leaders now are trying to get a handle on what happens when we send our kids off to college. They are exposed to all of this, and they're having conversations where they can't just easily come back home at night and say, hey, well, we talked about this, or this came up in school, or the teacher said X, Y, and Z. You're not always going to have your parents to lean on to have those conversations in real time. And you're going to have to do your own evaluation and certainly your own soul searching to say, okay, that may not be something that I should put a lot of credence in because, and to still be firm-footed and be able to stand on your foundation of faith.
Have you ever had a time where you doubted your faith or even the existence of God?
I have, especially in those low moments where you want to know, okay, why did this happen, or why was this allowed to happen, whether it's senseless acts that we see play out or whether it's something that really hits close to home. You go through moments. There are certain things that you even may yearn for and that you've prayed about and you sought the Lord and you thought for sure that you were going to get your answer or get your breakthrough, and it didn't happen. And it definitely causes you to question, to doubt, to wonder. Absolutely, I have been in some low places like that before. I've dealt with depression, and I certainly have had to come out of that, fortunately, with help from people who loved me, who are around me. It's definitely something that I can identify with as having dealt with it and having gone through it, which is why I think it's so important that we do acknowledge everything is not sunlight, roses, and rainbows.
That's right. Unicorns and rainbows, huh?
Exactly.
That's funny. I call myself a recovering atheist, and you talked about, sometimes you have to know that you know that you know that you know. And that skepticism in and of itself and that doubt drives my faith, Anita, and drives me to seek God's face on a regular basis. So I know that I know that I know that I know. I love the way you put that. I know that I know that I know that I know. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Finally, Anita, as we wrap up, what would you say to that person that is right on faith's edge? They've looked to God. They're wondering about God. Maybe they grew up in a Christian home, or maybe they didn't. They're right there on faith's edge, making that choice to believe or not to believe in God.
I would say be still and really, really just begin to pray that God would show you who He is. Don't pray for signs and wonders and miracles. I think that's where a lot of us get caught up. And even, I would dare say, people who don't have faith or who are on faith's edge and looking to potentially turn away from the faith that they once were vested in, that we look for the big bang when God moves so often in those quiet moments, and He is still and He whispers to us. And so there are things that will transpire where the dots start to connect. and he'll give you a piece of confirmation. And it's something that he may deposit in your spirit as you're seeking him. And then a friend will come along and say something, and they'll say it exactly the right way to really make it clear to you that God heard you. And that's one piece of confirmation. And then you have another someone in a conversation or something that will come across your attention, or, fall in your lap, and you're like, that seems a little bit more than coincidence. That's exactly the thing that I was talking to this person about, which was confirmation of something that I was seeking and praying about. That's how our God moves. It's in those still moments, if we allow ourselves, again, to just be quiet, be sincere, open our hearts, seek God, ask him to show you how real he is. I promise you he'll do.
I don't think we can say anything more than that. Anita Faye, the project is Kingdom Journey. What a fantastic album. Well done, Anita.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Take care. Anita's website is anitafaye.com. That's ANITAFAYE.com, anitafaye.com. And Kingdom Journey is available on Amazon.com. This link and all the other links can be found in today's show notes at onfaithsedge.com/117. That's onfaithsedge.com/117. I love bringing you engaging conversations about faith. If this show entertains you, encourages you, informs you, or brings value to you in any way whatsoever, will you consider financially backing the show by using any Amazon link on onfaithsedge.com? Now, we'll get a modest commission from the purchase, but it doesn't cost you a penny more. Well, that'll wrap up today's show. Thank you, Anita Faye, for being with us, and thank you for listening. You mean a lot to me, and you mean a lot to this show. Remember, God is real. He loves you, and so do I. God bless.
Thank you for listening to On Faith's Edge. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes, Stitcher Internet Radio, or your favorite podcast app on Android, Apple, or Windows devices. To reach out to Joe or leave comments about the show, visit onfaithsedge.com. You're important to us, and we would love to hear from you.